Hi everyone, it's Ed, and you're listening to the second public bonus Embassy exclusive episode released on the main VG Embassy RSS feed. As I announced last month, for the purpose of giving back to people that might be home and bored, or out at work and having a rough time with all of the quarantine coronavirus stuff going on, I felt like making the exclusive Patreon shows public so that everyone could listen would be just the right thing to do. Unfortunately, Todd and Joe can't be with me because obviously we can't all be in the same room together if we're following all of the CDC guidelines. So I decided that I would do some solo shows. I would put them out publicly. If you're a Patreon subscriber and you're really just in it to get the Embassy exclusive shows and you'd like to suspend your membership until we go back to the normal exclusive content, I completely understand and I would not fault you at all for that. But in the meantime, hopefully some people stick around and we'll all be able to share some cool stuff together and have some fun listening to some extra bonus content. So speaking of bonus content, this show is a kind of a complement to the 3DO episode that I put out last week. This is 5 tracks that I really wanted to add into the original show, but as I was kind of putting the original show together, I discovered that most of the games that I was choosing from were 3DO exclusives, so I really decided I wanted to focus on that because the non-exclusive stuff might have been games that people played on other more popular systems. So, here are some tracks from games that originated on the 3DO, but were later ported to other systems, and they might not have been very popular games either, so you may not have experienced them for yourselves. Anyway, a lot of these games were games that I grew up with, so I'm very familiar with them, and I grew up with them on the 3DO, so seeing them being played on a PlayStation or a Saturn just feels very strange to me. So I hope you guys enjoy it. This is a very loosely edited episode. I'm not going to do much except maybe take out very extended breaks if I have to look something up or whatever. If you hear me with lots of ums and uhs, it's because I'm really not going off a script. I'm just kind of sharing some cool stuff, sharing some memories of these games, and stitching it all together and putting it out. Let's take a listen to our first track. Actually, our first 2 tracks are going to be kind of a Berk Trieschmann showcase. If you guys recall, on the original podcast, I started off with a Berk Trieschmann track from Crash and Burn, which was the very first 3DO game ever released. Much like David Wise was for Rare, Berk Trieschmann was kind of the Crystal Dynamics in-house composer for the 3DO era. And so we're going to start off with a track from... and also, before I move on any further, the Crash and Burn soundtrack was originally written by Berk Trieschmann and then converted to mod format. So we didn't actually really hear like a real, raw Berk Trieschmann composition. So, that said, these are actual streaming audio files from the games themselves. So this is Berk Trieschmann performing his music as it was meant to be heard. So we're going to listen to Silt Sorrow, which plays in Worlds 5.1 and 5.2 from the game Off-World Interceptor, later known as Off-World Interceptor Extreme for the Saturn and the PlayStation. This came out in 1994 on the 3DO and then 1995 for the Saturn and PlayStation respectively, again composed by Berk Trieschmann with cinematic compositions for the full motion video scenes by Stephen S. Hennepin. Let's take a listen. Alright, that was Silt Sorrow, Worlds 5.1 and 5.2 from Off-World Interceptor, released in 1994, composed by Burke Trieschmann, with cinematic composition by Stephen S. Hennepin, and that was published and developed by Crystal Dynamics for the 3DO. And then, a year later, it came out as Off-World Interceptor Extreme for the PlayStation and the Saturn. Although not much was different about those two games, they ran a little more smoothly and maybe a little more quickly than the 3DO version did. Maybe that's why they called it the Extreme version. Not much clue there. But Crystal Dynamics was, as I said previously, like one of the premier developers of 3DO games, or as 3DO marketed them, 3DO interactive CDs. They refused to call them games for some reason, which maybe was part of why they failed as a console. To avoid calling your games games when it's clearly a game system is kind of weird. But much of the same team that worked on Crash and Burn also worked on this game. It's an interesting game. You're they call you a trash man, and you are kind of a bounty hunter, and you're given tasks via full motion video sequences to go race these bad guys, these fugitives, across different planets. And if you get to the end of the level within a certain amount of time, you block the bounty from leaving the planet, and you get money which you can use to upgrade your trucks for the next level. If you don't, then the bad guy wins, and you fail and you need to do it over again. The full motion video sequences in the PlayStation, the Saturn, and the 3DO are really good quality, really nice looking, full screen, full motion video, like broadcast quality stuff. They did a really good job of this, especially for early 5th generation console titles. But they knew that they had some really crappy acting and some really bad writing on their hands, and so they stuck a couple of extreme teenagers sitting on a couch in front of it, like Silhouette style, like Mystery Science Theater style, and they will make fun of the action going on the screen and kind of just pretty much make very lighthearted joke of the whole thing, which actually kind of works. I mean, the full motion video sequences are competent, but they leave a lot to be desired. So I think the whole little Mystery Science Theater thing kind of enhances it quite a bit. The game itself is decent. You're behind the view of this combat off-road SUV looking vehicle. You've got weapons, you can drop mines, you can get different forward-facing guns, shields, all these things you can purchase as you go through the game. So you're behind the SUV, and the SUV is a sprite. The level itself is 3D polygonal. You're driving into the screen a la Star Fox, but you always seem to be in some sort of a canyon. There's always walls on either side of you. And for the most part, it's kind of a linear path, but once in a while there will be a split in the canyon, and you can choose to take one direction or the other. Different levels have different colored canyons, basically, but you'll also see different sprite renditions of obstacles like huts and big palm trees and giant boulders. So it's as much dodging as it is trying to shoot down all of the bad guys, henchmen, as you can to quicken your pace so you can get through the level in time. Fun game. I mean, as a early 3DO adopter and stuff, it was cool to see another three-dimensional game, especially one where there was a lot more combat. This one definitely has its roots in Crash and Burn. It just feels very different. It's much more combat-based and much less about racing a track as fast as you can. And the full motion video sequences are funny. They're worth taking a listen to and watch. You can find clips from them on YouTube. And maybe you might need the context of the game to make them make a little bit more sense, but they have some pretty funny jokes in there, so worth checking out. The next track I have, as I said, it's a little Burke Trieschmann featurette. This is another game that Crystal Dynamics put out right around the same time. So we're going to listen to a track from Total Eclipse. This was released also on the 3DO in 1994 and then came out on the PlayStation right around the time that Off-World Interceptor Extreme did, 1995. So we're going to listen to Aqueous Major, which is the swamp level. Be right back. That was Aqueous Major, aka Swamp, from Total Eclipse, released in early 1994 on the 3DO, and then later in 1995 on the PlayStation as Total Eclipse Turbo. I guess they really like having their ports with more extreme names. We've got Off-World Interceptor Extreme and Total Eclipse Turbo. This game came out slightly before Off-World Interceptor, so this was released, like I said, January of 94, and then Off-World Interceptor came out in September of that same year. So I think this was going to be one of the launch titles for the 3DO, but ended up getting pushed back until after the Christmas season, which, again, another marketing blunder, but that's 3DO for you. The music here was composed, arranged, and produced by Burke Trieschmann, and the credits were nice enough to actually give us the individual musicians that worked on the music. So J.D. Riley on guitar and keyboards, Eric Orme on guitar, Dr. Loco on the saxophone, Ron Stallings also on the saxophone, and Frank Martin on the keyboards. So it looks like we had some programmed drums, as there's no officially credited drummer, which I totally get. I mean, this game as well as Off-World Interceptor both had really kind of dance meets rock, kind of industrial-ish soundtracks. Total Eclipse is a little bit more like rock-based, and then Off-World Interceptor has a very kind of clanky, machine-style musical sensibility to it. Kind of like Gritters from the previous episode. Lots of whooshes and clanks and stuff. Stuff that really gets my brain wheels turning. So again, this game runs basically on the same engine as Off-World Interceptor did. You are, instead of a vehicle driving on the ground, you are a vehicle flying in the air. So it's much more of a Star Fox feel, but I'd say even less 3D than Star Fox. So it's still got that same kind of inside a canyon feel that Off-World Interceptor does. You can go through like caves, and there's some areas of the levels where you're completely enclosed on all four sides, and a major part of this game is flying and dodging obstacles in front of you, whereas on Off-World Interceptor it was more like driving back and forth and jumping. This is, really moving in all four directions to try not to kill yourself while other enemies are trying to kill you, and I guess the cave is trying to kill you too. I really like the soundtracks to these games. The guitar work here is really good. There's some really good solos going on. It's a little echoey in the production. I'm not sure whether that is the fault of just the compression of the audio or whether it was recorded that way, but this is definitely a product of its time. This is like maybe a little bit more of a lighthearted version of something that like KMFDM might have put out in 1994. I definitely see some influence there. If you were to play Total Eclipse with the volume all the way down, it probably wouldn't seem like an extremely exciting and fast-paced game, but I think music like this throughout the game is really there to kind of pump up the action, and I wouldn't be surprised if the developers of the game told Trishman to really make the music sound extremely fast and extremely energetic, because it really helps the game feel a little bit more zippy than it might have otherwise been. So, decent game. It's impressive and good for the 3DO, but maybe doesn't hold up to games like Astro Trooper Vanarch, which you might be hearing more about on the next episode of VG Embassy, which is a fantastic kind of a Star Fox clone for the PlayStation 1. So if you're going to choose between two of those rail shooter kind of PlayStation 1 games, go for Vanarch and just listen to the Total Eclipse soundtrack for its kind of electro rock sensibilities. Alright, we're going to move on to one of my favorite 3DO games of all time. This is Road and Track presents Need for Speed. Yes, the first Need for Speed game released by Electronic Arts. This is Funkin' C, composed by Edwin Dolinsky. right, that was Funkin' C from Need for Speed, released on the 3DO in 1994, composed by Edwin Dolinsky. This game was also released for DOS in 1995, and then the PlayStation and Saturn versions came out in 1996. I'm not sure about the DOS game, but I know the PlayStation and Saturn games had different soundtracks. So even though you may have played the game on those consoles, you wouldn't have heard the same music as what you're listening to here. I believe the composer was entirely different as well. There was also additional music credited to Coco Productions for the soundtrack, but I believe what you just listened to was an Edwin Dolinsky composition. I think the additional music was for the full motion video sequences. They put together like little montages of all the cars you can drive in the game, doing skids and brake tests and stuff like that, and there's some crazy music going on in the background. So Coco Productions probably did the video and the audio production for those sequences. Need for Speed was great, and it does not hold up very well now. It feels extremely slow and clunky. Fine, yes, but when the most advanced 3D racing game we had at this point was Stunt Race FX on the SNES, this game was just unbelievable. They used really, really nice photographic textures for all of the surfaces in the game. So the game has a really realistic look to it. Even if you look at the thumbnails now, if you're not zoomed way in from a distance, I mean, they look almost photographic. So, once you get up close, that's when you can realize that they're actually just cardboard, cutout sprites that are always kind of facing the camera. But the game was really cool. There's a lot of different cars to choose from. You can race other cars. There was oncoming traffic. The courses were long and linear, so you weren't just racing around the same 4 turns over and over again. The music was mostly played during the menu screens, so the reason why this track is called Funkin' C is because there were 3 different randomized tracks that would play during the menus, and if you go into the 3DO file system and pull out the music, they're called Funkin' A, Funkin' B, and Funkin' C, and then you would get the other files that were named for the different cars for their little featurettes that were in there. So Funkin' C was always the one that I was most enamored with when it would play when I was playing this game. I played this game, I kid you not, this is probably the most played game for the 3DO that I had. I have probably put at least 200 hours into this game. My brother and I just loved it. It was so much fun to just race down these long highways, racing the computer. Once in a while, you would have a radar, and it would start beeping and get faster and faster as you got closer to a police car, and the police car would start chasing you, so you'd have to outrun the police car. A lot of the stuff that was later integrated into other Need for Speed games, like, obviously Need for Speed Hot Pursuit would be the perfect example of that, but, you would have to outrun these cops, and if they caught you, then you would lose time, and the cop would pull you over and give you a ticket, and you would lose a car. You only had like 4 or 5 cars, I think, and each time you crashed out, you would lose a car, and if you crashed out too many times, you couldn't finish the race. So it was mainly you against the clock. You could pick like a Lamborghini and then race against like another much slower car like a Miata or something, and win nearly every single time. But you were mostly just trying to get better times against, for instance, my younger brother, who was also really into this game as well. And it would save your times on the leaderboard and save it inside the 3DO's memory, which was very good for people that wanted to continually try to increase and get better. So the music is very, very funky. It's got bongo-esque beats, some nice little wah-wah guitars there. Nice long piece. It's unfortunately like half CD quality, 22 kilohertz stereo, so it's a bit on the muddy side. I haven't been able to find any better quality audio than this, but yeah, I love it. I wanted to share it because this is literally sharing like a really nostalgic part of my childhood. The PlayStation version is interesting, and I got it because looking on the back of the box, you see images that look just like the 3DO version. It runs like really smoothly, and it has the same tracks that the 3DO does, plus they added some extra tracks which are more like lap based tracks. I don't know, it just doesn't seem as fun without like the slow kind of clunkiness that was on the 3DO, and I still come back and play this game all the time and just totally like ignore the PlayStation version, even though on paper it's a much better game. So I don't know, you can check out both yourself and figure out which one you like better. It's a lot of fun. It's why the Need for Speed series became so popular, because this entry was so strong. It's just got this really weird charm to it that it's really just hard to describe. You've got to kind of play it to believe it. So anyways, one of the games that I thought would prove that the 3DO was a worthy contender in the 5th generation. I guess I was wrong. Oh well. We're going to move on to our next track, and that is Pebble Beach Golf Links. We're going to listen to, I'm not exactly sure where this plays. I think it is a pause screen. On the game files, it's just called KI-169, which has no bearing on where it plays in the game at all. It's a really, really nice piece. It's by Yumi Satake, otherwise known as Yumi Kinoshita, who, if you're a VGM Jukebox fan, you will definitely know who she is. So let's give a listen to this track from Pebble Beach Golf Links for the 3DO. All right, so I did a little research and I think I found this track under the name Course Overview. So that's what we're going to call it. That was Corso Review from Pebble Beach Golf Links, the 3DO version of the game, released in 1994, composed by Yumi Satake, which at the time she was known as Yumi Kinoshita. Fantastic little track. I know that, the VGM Jukebox played a lot of golf music, and so I went through their archives to try to see if anything from this game had been played there before. And no, so they've played music from the Genesis and the SNES versions of the game. Both were composed by Kinoshita, but not the 3DO version. So cool. I know that most of the stuff that has been shared from her has been her 16-bit chiptune compositions. I haven't heard much at all of her kind of unfettered, just streaming audio music, and I think she keeps the magic alive with it for sure. There's just some really nice piano runs, excellent instrument choice and selection. It's just so nice and easy and relaxing, quite a bit different from a lot of the other music I've shared so far on the show. Yeah, this game was decent. It was made by T&E Soft, and then when it got ported to the Saturn, Sega kind of gobbled it up and was like, oh no, you're part of our Sega Sports lineup. So they kind of make believe that they are the ones that developed the game. T&E Soft just gets a little minor credit underneath the logo, but photorealistic courses with digitized Mortal Kombat style golfers, but really nicely animated. Pretty easy to read courses. The Saturn version performs a little better, but doesn't look as good, honestly. I mean, the 3DO had some pretty decent high-res capabilities for graphics, and the Saturn's polygons were always a little chunky and janky, so I think actually the 3DO wins out in terms of graphics for this one. Also, the Saturn's music was all sequenced using the chip that was in the Saturn itself, so the music was not as good. I didn't find this exact arrangement on the Saturn version. I know there were some overlaps between some of the music that were on the 3DO version and the Saturn version, but this one seems to be an exclusive track to the 3DO version. So, anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed it. Hope it relaxed y'all a little bit. We've got 2 more songs on the way. I know I said I was going to do 5 at the beginning of the show, but I forgot that I had an extra bonus track at the end. So, anyways, we're going to listen to a track called Free Fall from the game Starfighter. This was composed by John Avery of Rhubarb Productions. Be right back. All right, that was Free Fall from Starfighter. Came out in 1996 on the 3DO, composed by John Avery of Rhubarb Productions. So this game had an interesting history. It originally started off on the Archimedes Acorn 32-bit in 1994, and then got ported to DOS, Mac, PlayStation, Saturn, and 3DO in 1996, published and developed by a company I've never heard of before called the World Federation Entertainment's Network, aka WFE. So, cool little track. It's maybe a little repetitive, but it's nice dance music, and I think it's got some good production quality, and I really like kind of vegging out to it. Like, this game has modes where you can just kind of fly around the scenery and there aren't any enemies or anything, so you can just kind of chill out, listen to these tracks, and just kind of fly around and have some fun. Almost reminds me of kind of like the island flight on Wii Sports Resort or something like that. The game itself is neat if you've played maybe, I don't know, Warhawk on the PlayStation, or like some of the Ace Combat series. It's very similar to that. The game looks like, like a Star Fox kind of perspective, but you've got a full 360 degree range of movement. The cool thing about this game is that the 3DO version, amongst the 3DO Saturn and PlayStation ports, the 3DO version is actually much, much better. It's got a smoother frame rate, it's got better looking graphics, it's got an almost infinite draw distance. Like, you can see so far into the horizon. Like, so this game, you fly around on the planet, you have to do missions, but if you fly high enough, you actually leave the atmosphere and you can level out and look down on the planet, and you actually see the curvature of the planet, and then you can dive back down and go back to where you're supposed to be. It's really cool, and for something like that came out in 1994 originally, to do that so seamlessly, especially on the 3DO hardware, is kind of like mind-blowing. So if you want to check out some YouTube videos, there's one that's just called Starfighter 3DO. If you search for that on YouTube, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. And the game is really fun. The Earth itself is completely deformable, so anything you shoot at basically explodes. That goes for roadways, it goes for buildings, it goes for enemies, it goes for hills on the landscape. You can literally keep shooting at a hill until you've entirely flattened it. You almost kind of like terraform the Earth as you're shooting your energy beams at it. It's a really, really ambitious game. The missions get a little boring after a while, but I think they focused much more on the technology of the game than they did the actual gameplay, and I can't blame them. They were really trying to wow and impress audiences with this stuff back then, because it was brand new technology, and developing stuff like that and also keeping it fun must have been a Herculean task. Starfighter is one of those games that doesn't get talked about that much, even as much as 3DO games don't get talked about that much. Starfighter even less so. It is kind of a hidden gem. I think if you are familiar with those kind of 3D flight games, you can immediately jump into this one and start doing pretty well at it. There was a giant learning curve when I was playing it back in the day, because simply wasn't used to having so much freedom of movement. Even Star Fox, you were only flying forward. So this one, we were regularly crashing into the ground over and over and over again. But we had some good tunes to keep us company while we did it, so can't really go wrong there. So next up, for our last track, we are going to listen to the title theme from the game PO'd. This was published and developed by AnyChannel Software, originally released on the 3DO in 1995 and later ported over to the PlayStation. We'll be right back. Alright, that was the title theme from the game P.O.'d, which was released on the 3DO in 1994 and later on the PlayStation. Very kind of a late 80s, early 90s vibe with this one. I love those kind of screamy guitars. They always remind me of like Top Gun or just like really dramatic kind of overdriven guitars that ring out for a long time over those kind of interesting, very rounded keyboards. Makes for a very unique, kind of very timely sound from that era of music. This was a first-person shooter that, again, kind of like Starfighter, was really ambitious. It really wanted to kind of mimic the success that Doom and Duke Nukem had, but their big idea to make this game unique was to make these levels, instead of tiny corridors and hallways where you would kind of move from room to room in a maze-like setting, they were these gigantic open spaces with tons of platforms all over the place. So if you could imagine like Doom as being like a Super Mario Brothers game, right? Where it's pretty linear. You're going from point A to point B, left to right. You know, Mario World, there might be a couple of different exits or weird spot that you can go get a power-up or something. P.O.'d was like the Sonic the Hedgehog version, where it's multi-tiered. There's different heights that you can go on with different kind of like ecospheres of enemies on each different level. There's no one set. You're kind of zigzagging through the entire level. That's kind of like what P.O.'d is in first person. So I never really got the hang of it. You really need to like memorize these levels to be able to figure out the most efficient way to get through them. You do get a jetpack as an item in the game, which allows you to basically like fly around these warehouse style levels looking for the right items that you need to unlock the exit door. But again, they tried with the photorealistic digitized graphics here. You play as a cook on a space flight. I guess it was like a 6-month mission where you get frozen for a little while, you work for 2 weeks, and you get frozen on the way back. So like you get paid a lot for like 2 weeks worth of work. So he's bunked down in this ship, and while he's frozen, the ship gets invaded by these alien bugs, and he ends up waking up last. So he's the only survivor left on the ship, and he's got to eradicate all of the alien life forms that have invaded. So there's some really weird stuff in this game, like walking butts. Your major weapon is a fry pan, of course, because you're a cook. You got some really weird humanoid enemies, lots of splats and gross out humor. It's an interesting game. The 3DO, like I said, doesn't handle 3D that well, so there's a lot of really flat textures that kind of disappear if you're looking at them straight on, so it doesn't really give you that good illusion of like solid environments that you're walking around in. It looks just like a bunch of very flat pieces of paper that you're kind of walking on. It was cool to see a unique and original first-person shooter for the 3DO, something that you couldn't play anywhere else. I mean, first-person shooters were becoming all the rage at that point. With the success of Doom, every system had their own Doom clone, and this was, again, no exception. Very kind of cheesy sequenced music during the gameplay itself. This particular piece of music was the only streaming audio there was in the whole game, and I really like it. It's for some reason really like it just sounds very familiar and nostalgic to me, even though I didn't play this game that much. I think when this title screen came up, it was just one of those title screens that I would just kind of sit and listen to the music. Maybe I would even turn on the game just to listen to the music and not necessarily to play it, because I remember not having a whole bunch of fun with this one. I am getting punchy. It is getting late. I hope you guys enjoyed this supplemental Embassy exclusive bonus show, learned a little bit more about the 3DO. I'm always, like I said at the end of the last one, happy to answer any questions or give suggestions or point you to cool videos of the games that I have featured. Just to ask on the Patreon, email thevgembassy@gmail.com. Go over to our website at thevgembassy.com and hit up our Discord. Hang out with us. There's a whole bunch of really cool people on the Discord, and we're chatting all day long. It's become a really cool kind of support group for all of the crazy quarantine COVID-19 stuff that's been going on. So a lot of really, really good people there that will have the same interests you do if you are also listening to a VGM podcast. So, again, thank you to Indira J for the art. A huge thank you to all of our Patreon patrons, some of whom you should be hearing very soon in new episodes this coming Friday. And I can finally, announce this for real because it's been recorded and it's all ready to be put out. Chris Murray, aka Justapunk, will be joining me for a look at some of our favorite PlayStation 1 titles of yesteryear. So we're keeping it real with the 5th generation CD-based consoles here. And I'm actually having a ball re-exploring all of these very cool games that really paved the way for a lot of the games that we play nowadays. So this being Monday or Tuesday, whenever I put it out, I'll see you guys again at the end of the week with an official episode of the VG Embassy. Stay home, stay safe, wash your hands, wear your masks. Otherwise, I'll have to ground you. No video games for a week. Okay? All right. Peace out.